Good morning. Welcome back to Venture Daily, the fastest way to catch up on everything that matters in tech, startups, and venture capital.
Founders, funders, and fans of the future, this is your morning jolt of insight news you can actually use and guests who know their stuff. I'm Josiah Simons.
I'm Jackson Fordyce, and on today's show, President Trump is quietly wiring Palantir across the government, laying digital rails for what may be a master database on American citizens.
Business Insider slashes 21% of staff and doubles down on AI, betting automation can rescue a shrinking newsroom.
And a judge now holds Google's fate as the DOJ pushes to dismantle its search engine and clear the runway for AI challengers. It's Monday, June 2nd. Let's get you smarter before your first meeting. Josiah, Harvard is back in President Trump's crosshairs today. Starting this month, every international applicant to Harvard, students, faculty, even researchers will have their social media combed by the U.S. government to verify they aren't posting anything in support of Palestine, something the administration considers anti-Semitic.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio sent a cable to embassies ordering complete screening of online activity for any non-immigrant visa tied to the university. That includes private Instagram accounts and apparently having an account with few or no posts, quote, may be reflective of evasiveness by the State Department and will be flagged.
Of course, this is not the first time Harvard has been targeted by the White House, recently banned from admitting international students and stripped of billions in federal research funding.
Now, it's a pilot site for a nationwide social media screening system that could soon reach universities across the country. All right, before we jump in, I want to tell you about Public. Public.com. If you take investing seriously, you know about Public.com. That's where you can invest in everything: stocks, options, bonds, crypto. You can even earn some of the highest yields in the industry, like the 7% or higher yield.
Yes.
You can lock in with a bond account. Public is a FINRA-registered, SIPC insured platform that takes your investments as seriously as you do. Fund your account in 5 minutes or less at public.com/venture. And get up to $10,000 when you transfer your old portfolio. Paid for by Public Investing. Full disclosures in podcast description. So go down to our link in the description, public.com/venture.
Yep.
So that the lovely people down at Public know who sent you.
Public.com
It really helps support the show.
/venture. Public.com/venture. Big Brother is watching you? That was the headline of the weekend as the Trump administration ostensibly just handed Palantir the keys to America's data kingdom.
What we know is that Palantir, Peter Thiel's data analytics firm, is quietly expanding its footprint across the federal government. Contracts with the IRS, ICE, Social Security, even talks with the Department of Education.
The backdrop here is that in March, President Trump signed an executive order to unify data sharing across federal agencies, and Palantir's Foundry platform is the glue stitching it all together.
Critics say this sets the stage for a potential master database of personal info on Americans, bank accounts, medical history, immigration status, all centralized and searchable. Privacy advocates are warning this could be weaponized.
And it's not just speculation. ICE just signed a $30 million deal with Palantir to build a system tracking migrant movement in real time. Foundry is already inside DHS, HHS, and the IRS.
Meanwhile, some Palantir employees are raising red flags. 13 former staffers signed a letter urging the company to back away from the Trump administration's efforts. One strategist even resigned, calling the ICE work a red line.
Palantir says they build just the tools. It's up to the government how they're used.
Of course, if the government does consolidate all this data, it could redefine the power of federal surveillance, especially if it's used to target political opponents, immigrants, or activists. Big Brother? Terrifying. Or a consolidation of government data, dramatically increasing efficiency, reducing waste, and improving public services. Much less scary. Only time will tell.
Business Insider just laid off 21% of its staff, over 1/5 of the newsroom, while simultaneously announcing that the news outlet wants to lean more heavily on artificial intelligence.
CEO Barbara Pang dropped the memo on Thursday, saying these cuts will touch every department, and they sure did, with well over 200 employees being let go.
And the timing of these layoffs can't be ignored, as Insider's publicly pivoting its entire strategy to lean on generative AI. According to Pang, 70% of BI staff already uses enterprise ChatGPT, and they want that number to be at 100%.
In the past year, we've launched multiple AI-driven products, Pang said, including generative AI search and a paywall, with more on the way. She added that AI could help Business Insider scale and operate more efficiently, noting the company was born in a time of disruption when the smartphone was reshaping how people consume news and has always thrived by taking risks.
Lots of backlash in response, including a statement from the Insider Union accused Axel Springer, the German media giant that owns BI, of gutting journalism for profit. Their words: a brazen pivot away from journalism toward greed. For a deeper dive in the story, I talked to David Danishgar.
My name is David Danishgar. I'm the CEO of Whippy AI.
AI journalism is a development most people would reject at first glance, but it does feel like it's somewhat inevitable, right? Like that is where we are heading. That doesn't mean it will be embraced, however. So I asked David, can AI-generated content retain reader trust and credibility in financial journalism?
I think the short answer to that is yes. And I'll tell you why I think in the essence of like financial journalism, I myself as a CEO now run some of my P&Ls through ChatGPT. I ask it questions, it analyzes it. So I think part of that trust probably comes from the fact that people are utilizing it itself in the financial world. I remember the first time I even used ChatGPT, I showed my accountant what it could do, and within weeks they were using it as well. So I think just our ability to use these softwares ourselves for modeling, for simple financial decision making, like that kind of does give us the ability to see that like, hey, yes. And then the data around AI in which we're seeing, not just, by the way, not just from the financial world, but people that are readers of financial publications, seeing their kids be able to speak Italian because they're practicing with ChatGPT. I think just all those things, kind of the tailwinds are pointing people to be much more open, and they're seeing that right now.
It's pretty interesting. I mean, yeah, if readers are already using AI tools in their own lives, it probably does shift what they expect from news too.
Right. It's almost like if you're trusting ChatGPT with your taxes or your kids' homework, maybe seeing it behind a financial article doesn't feel that scary anymore.
And as we mentioned, the BI staff did not embrace the layoffs or this new AI direction for the publication. I wanted to read a statement from the Insider Union in the News Guild of New York decrying the layoffs. The statement specifically calls out Axel Springer, a German publisher that owns Business Insider. The layoffs of our talented coworkers and union members is another example of Axel Springer's brazen pivot away from journalism toward greed, the statement read. So I asked David, what does the backlash from the Insider Union say about newsroom culture in the AI era?
Look, change is going to be difficult. Like, I'm going to cite another example is my dad's a doctor. He's a gastroenterologist. There was one person that all they were doing in the old world. Jackson, you might be too young, but there were files back there. There weren't computers, and you would file people. And at a certain point, that person either had to move to a different job or is unfortunately no longer there. Like, is that change the user experience? Does that change the medical world? So I think the short answer is there are certain places right now that I think AI does a disservice, but there are a lot of low-hanging fruit that make companies more efficient. And I would just tell you on the BI Insider side of stuff, my gut is they're not the only publication that's doing that. And so if they're not staying ahead of the times, there are certain positions as a result that might have to let go because of poor performance, right? So I think for all the people that are always saying like, hey, this is ridiculous, AI is actually coming in and either taking over jobs or taking over parts of the jobs. I just think back to that my dad's business or certain things that the internet changed. And my advice to those people is actually more so along the lines that if this is the direction and we're seeing it right now, like adopt AI tools, because those are the people that are going to get hired tomorrow that know how to build prompts, that know how to use these types of softwares. And so to the BI president or the person that they're kind of going at, my gut is he's doing what's best for the business.
Yeah, it's hard not to feel for the folks who got laid off, but I get what David's saying. Like, this is a part of a much bigger shift that's hitting a lot of industries right now.
Yeah, and newsroom culture has always had that tension, right? Between the craft of journalism and the business side of actually making money. I feel like the tension is only going to heighten in the AI era.
If this is a successful move for BI on the business side, it's likely only a matter of time before we see other publications following soon. So I ask David, what does this move signal for other legacy media companies eyeing AI integration?
Yeah. I think it shows that they need to make the move. And I'll keep citing examples because that's easy for people to kind of understand. I know we see it in AI, but like in sports, which is very probably something that everyone knows, like someone was the first one to take off on replays, right? And at that point in time, I don't know which sport it is. Let's even call it tennis. I'm sure in the beginning, others were like, wow, but like at this point, you see all sports doing it, right? So sometimes it takes a leader to make changes that are tough. In general, if that leader is respected by their peers, they generally are following suit. My gut is that those other companies have already been talking about it internally.
So the big question is, will this AI bet position Business Insider ahead of the curve, or will hollow out its brand in the process? And so I asked David for his take.
I mean, we're talking about it right now, right? So, I could be biased in the sense that I'm a CEO of an AI company, so you take that with a grain of salt. But I think the things that I'm seeing in AI, just the productivity that we're seeing from our customers at Whippy, like in some cases 10x what they did before, I think positions BI to be a leader in that space. And again, I think in that article, there are different difficult decisions that have to be made. And it's never good to obviously lay someone off. But I think as the CEO of that company or their fiduciary right is to their company and to do what they think is best for their company. And I would assume very soon you'll see many others come out with that same direction.
It's one of those moves that feels risky now, but might end up looking obvious in hindsight. Thank you to David Danishgar for coming on the show. All right, third and last story of today, the future of Google's search dominance. And maybe AI itself is now in the hands of a federal judge.
It's the final chapter in a landmark antitrust case against Google. The Justice Department says the company's 90% market share in search is the result of illegal monopoly tactics, like paying Apple $20 billion a year to be the default search engine of Safari.
The DOJ is proposing some pretty aggressive remedies. They want Google to sell off Chrome, stop making those default deals with companies like Apple, and even share some of its search data with competitors. It's the biggest antitrust swing since the government tried to break up Microsoft in the early 2000s.
And of course, AI is at the center of it all. Google says it's already facing pressure from players like ChatGPT and Perplexity and argues the market is already shifting on its own. No judge required, as OpenAI, Anthropic, and Perplexity have been steadily chipping away at Google's dominance. But the DOJ argues that Google pre-installing Gemini on Android is just monopoly tactics in a new form.
Judge Amit Mehta heard closing arguments on Friday and is expected to have a ruling by August. His decision could fundamentally change how tech giants compete in the AI age.
This case isn't just about search anymore. It's about whether one company gets to control the gateway to the internet, and maybe the next generation of AI-powered discovery too.
For a deeper dive on this story, I talked to our friend Jake OShea.
I'm Jake OShea. I'm a principal at Antler, a global pre-seed VC fund here in Austin, Texas. And I also run AITX, a community for AI engineers and AI founders across the state of Texas.
Josiah, the antitrust case targets Google's monopoly on search, but AI competitors may already be chipping away at that dominance. If the market is shifting on its own, is legal intervention still needed? I asked Jake for his take.
It's a good question. It's tough to answer, right? Because Google does have a bit of a monopoly in search, right? It's got 90+% of the search market. But at the same time, the reason that's important is that search traditionally has been kind of the gateway to the internet. And with new LLMs coming and growing in popularity, that's becoming a new gateway of how people discover content, products, et cetera, on the internet. And Google's definitely not the market dominant player there. They're a player, but I would argue that folks like ChatGPT, Anthropic with Claude, even Perplexity actually have a much larger share of kind of like the AI discovery market. So in terms of like, is legislation necessary? I don't know. If you're legislating on search, then there's a pretty good argument to be made given their dominance in the search industry. But if you kind of play this trend of people moving more towards going to LLMs and chatbots to discover new content and kind of go into the rest of the internet, then I don't think there's good legal standing to kind of regulate Google in that way because in many ways they're kind of behind in that space.
I asked Jake, do you think the government should break up Google's current deals with Apple and Android, even as Apple prepares to add ChatGPT and other AI rivals into Safari?
I think that this idea of bundling is not unique to Google, right? This is a tried and true go-to-market strategy for lots of different companies. So right now, Google's got a deal where they pay Apple quite a bit of money. I believe it's like $2 billion a year to be the default search engine. But that model of kind of paid placement has existed for a really long time. Netflix does this with Roku TVs. Netflix does this with hotels, where they make Netflix one of the default options for streaming. Meta's done this for quite a while. They have deals with OEMs like Samsung, where Facebook and WhatsApp are automatically installed on a lot of their phones. TikTok has a similar type of deal with Samsung. Spotify has a deal like that with Samsung. So because of Google being vertically integrated, they have a bit of an advantage in terms of being the default on these other platforms, as well as kind of the Google-owned platforms. But the counterpoint to that is, Android's an open source platform. They're not dominating the market because Google is dominating the market. They're dominating the market because it's the easiest way to get an operating system on a third-party created phone or device. So I think that it makes a lot more sense to just regulate the way that those deals are done. Right? Netflix isn't kind of the default option for streaming. It's just an option for streaming that's readily available. Whereas the current deals have Google being kind of the default option for search. So I think it makes a lot more sense to just create legislation around the way that those deals can be done in terms of like not making something a default or not enabling them to do kind of a paid placement deal when they're vertically integrated with the rest of the stack, as opposed to like just this specific one-off. It feels a little bit targeted towards Google in a way that I don't think is necessarily fair, just given the popularity of that pay-for-placement business model across a bunch of other big tech companies.
Yeah, and that deal you mentioned between Google and Apple is actually $20 billion, not $2 billion.
Yeah, every year.
Every year, yeah, it's crazy. And I hadn't really thought about how common that pay-for-default setup is, like with Netflix and Roku.
Totally. But I wonder if it's different when it's Google, just because they've got their hands in so many layers. Android, Chrome, the search engine itself. it's not just one deal, it's the whole ecosystem.
My last question for Jake was this. If the judge rules against Google in August, what precedent could that set for how AI platforms are integrated into dominant tech ecosystems?
Another great question. I think if the judge rules against them, again, this ruling is much more focused on kind of search and search dominance. It could create an interesting precedent for placement and priority for AI models, right? Google has talked about doing similar types of deals that they did with making Google the default search engine, with making Gemini the default kind of language model or AI model. And I don't see any reason why, if the judge rules that that's not allowed for Google and search, that it shouldn't be allowed for other models with other platforms, right? So if we see OpenAI starting to do these exclusivity deals or these default deals with other platforms, I think there'd be strong legal precedent to just nix that and make that not possible. Those are some of like the possibilities that I see coming if the judge rules that Google's not allowed to do some of these paid placement or default search deals.
Thank you to Jake OShea for joining Venture Daily.
That's it for Venture Daily. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. We hope we helped you get a little smarter.
And thank you to Content Stack for letting us use your space to film this show every single day. And if you like the show today, whether you're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or X, leave us a like, a comment, and a review. Throw us a 5-star rating if you think we earned it. And as always, we'll see you Tuesday morning on Venture Daily.